At 3:30 a.m., the world felt paused, like someone had pressed mute on existence and forgotten to turn it back on. There was no wind, no voices, no movement beyond the faint, far-off whisper of tires passing on a highway I couldn't see. Even the street lamp above me flickered like it was undecided about staying awake. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, fingers stiff, unmoving. My breath fogged the windshield in uneven bursts, each one shallow, each one slower than the last, as though my body was negotiating with itself about whether it still needed to keep going. The clock on the dashboard glowed faintly. 3:30 a.m. Christmas morning. That fact landed with a strange dullness, like a word that no longer carried meaning. Christmas wasn't supposed to look like this. It wasn't supposed to be silent. It wasn't supposed to be cold and empty and parked beneath a dying street lamp in a lot that smelled faintly of asphalt and old rain. Everything I owned was behind me. Not metaphorically. Literally. I twisted slightly in my seat and looked back. The rear window was blocked entirely, boxes stacked to the ceiling, bags wedged into impossible spaces, loose items crammed wherever gravity allowed. My life, reduced and compressed, packed so tightly it felt like it might rupture the car itself. A 3-bedroom house. Years of accumulation. Memories. Comfort. Stability. All of it distilled into a Honda HR-V. And there was nowhere to unload it. No driveway. No garage. No front door waiting to open. Just this parking lot. I stared at my phone in the center console like it might suddenly wake up and explain how I'd arrived here, like the screen itself owed me clarity. A few hours ago, I believed I was finally choosing happiness. Now I was trying to understand how someone could watch another person dismantle their entire life and say nothing. We were together for 3 years. That sentence still felt solid in my mind, like something factual, something earned. 3 years isn't fleeting. It's not casual. It's not accidental. 15 hours apart by car. Far enough to make spontaneity impossible. Close enough to make hope dangerous. Distance has a strange way of sharpening emotion. Every visit felt intentional. Every goodbye carried weight. Every reunion came with the sense that we were borrowing time from a future that hadn't arrived yet. We didn't meet young. There was no reckless optimism or naive belief that love alone could fix everything. I was 45. She was 44. We'd both lived enough life to know what didn't work, enough to recognize patterns, enough to be careful. Or so I believed. We talked every day. Not the surface-level kind of talking where people trade updates and distractions. Real conversations. Long conversations. The kind where silence is allowed because trust fills the space. We talked about money. About kids. About aging parents. About past mistakes. About the people we used to be and the versions of ourselves we were still trying to forgive. She told me how lonely it felt carrying everything alone. How exhausting it was to be strong all the time. How she worried she'd never get ahead, never feel secure. I told her how stagnant my life felt. How I'd done everything right, been responsible, dependable, steady, only to realize that happiness always seemed just slightly out of reach. We traveled back and forth, taking turns closing the distance. Long weekends that felt like practice runs for a life we were planning. She paid for more of the travel than I did, something that built my trust even deeper. This wasn't someone using me. This was someone investing. Or so I thought. When my job laid me off in July, it felt catastrophic, until it didn't. They offered a 2-year remote contract. I'd keep my severance as long as I stayed on. It felt like a door cracking open. For nearly a year before that, we'd talked about her moving to me, but money was always tight for her, always just a little too tight to make the leap. So 6 months ago, we decided together. I would move to her. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. Once that decision was made, there was no hesitation. Only momentum. Once I committed, Everything else followed. I sold my house in a brutal market. Barely broke even. Years of equity dissolved into numbers that didn't match the effort it took to build them. But I told myself it didn't matter. Houses were replaceable. This wasn't about money. This was about choosing happiness. I sold furniture. Gave away things I'd once imagined keeping forever. Donated items that still carried pieces of me in them. Each decision felt clean, purposeful. Every box I packed felt symbolic, proof that I wasn't halfway in, proof that I believed in what we were building, proof that I trusted her with the most fragile thing I had left, my future. She knew all of it. We talked daily about the move, about Christmas, about how this year would finally be different. I sent her gifts months in advance, small reminders that distance was temporary, that this was real. I packed my car carefully, almost ceremonially, making sure nothing shifted, making sure everything fit. By the time I finished, there was nothing left. I stood alone in the empty house before locking the door for the last time. The silence echoed differently when it was intentional, when it meant closure instead of loneliness. I didn't feel fear. I felt certainty. The night before I was supposed to leave, she called. Her voice was different. Measured, controlled, like someone walking across thin ice. "There's a problem," she said. The words landed softly, but something in my chest tightened immediately. She told me her ex-husband, divorced 16 years, separated 6, had suddenly decided she needed to be out of the house by January 5th. Since I was coming, he planned to move back in. I felt anger flare, immediate and sharp. Not at her. At him. I went straight into problem-solving mode, told her to use $2,000 of the money we had set aside to hire an attorney. Her name was still on the mortgage. He never refinanced. She'd been paying on it for years. Or so I believed. I pulled divorce paperwork, called lawyers, asked questions, took control the only way I knew how. I booked a hotel and told her I'd delay my drive a day or two while we got things sorted. I was exhausted, wired, running on adrenaline and trust, and the belief that love meant solving problems together. She told me she ordered the paperwork, scheduled the appointments, promised updates. Then she went quiet. Silence has weight. It presses on you differently depending on what you're expecting it to contain. Sometimes silence feels peaceful. Sometimes it feels like relief. But this silence, this one felt wrong. It stretched too long, settled too deeply. Hours passed. At first, I told myself she was overwhelmed. Legal paperwork is exhausting. Conflict is draining. She had a teenage son to worry about, cats to consider. A future suddenly thrown into chaos. It made sense that she'd need space. So I waited. I checked my phone too often, then told myself to stop. I distracted myself by packing the hotel room, reorganizing the same boxes in my car even though they were already packed. I replayed the conversation in my head, searching for reassurance I might have missed. Nothing. The room felt stale, like air that had been breathed too many times. My body ached from lack of sleep. I hadn't rested properly in days, my mind refusing to shut down, running contingency plans and worst-case scenarios on repeat. Lawyers. Temporary housing. Storage units. Alternate timelines. I lay down, just for a moment. That moment turned into unconsciousness. When I woke up, the room was dark. My phone buzzed faintly against the nightstand, the screen lighting up the ceiling like a warning flare. Just after midnight. I reached for it instinctively, expecting a message, an update, an apology, anything that would anchor me again. Instead, I saw the notification. $2,000 returned. No explanation. No text. No voicemail. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling through myself. The room seemed to tilt, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I sat upright, heart pounding, fingers already dialing before my brain caught up. She answered. And in that moment, before she spoke, I knew. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Not the frantic tone of someone scrambling to fix a problem. Not the exhausted voice of someone overwhelmed. This was steadier, resigned, as if a decision had already been made long before this call. "I need to tell you something," she said. The truth came out slowly at first, like she was testing how much it could bear. She'd been having serious money problems, worse than she ever admitted. Back in late August, months ago, she asked her ex-husband to move back into the house to help financially. He gave up his place to do it. She never told me. The words didn't land all at once. They came in fragments, each one lodging itself somewhere painful. August. That was when we were actively planning my move. Talking daily. Counting down months. Building a future in real time. For months, another man had been living in the house I believed I was moving into. Not visiting. Not stopping by. Living there. She hadn't told him I was coming until 2 days ago. I felt something crack inside my chest, not sharp, not explosive, more like a slow fracture spreading quietly through something I didn't realize was still holding me together. "I never thought you'd really do it," she said. The sentence hung between us, devastating in its simplicity. "I never thought you'd give up everything to be here." I didn't yell. I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. She talked about her son, how moving him would be unfair. About the cats, how no apartments would take all 3. About how she couldn't find a place quickly enough. About how this would disrupt her entire life. As if my life hadn't already been dismantled. As if I hadn't already paid the price for believing her. I realized then that the lie wasn't born from cruelty. It came from fear. From disbelief. From someone who wanted the comfort of my presence without the risk of my commitment becoming real. She hadn't planned to betray me. She had planned to stall me. And I had outrun her hesitation with my certainty. When the call ended, there was nothing left to say. I didn't drive right away. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. The hotel room felt suddenly hostile, too small, too temporary, too aware of what I no longer had. I loaded the last of my things into the car and pulled out without a destination. At 3:30 a.m., I turned into a quiet parking lot and shut off the engine. That was it. Homeless. Not in the dramatic sense, not yet, but functionally. There was no place to go, no plan left intact. Everything I owned was with me and nowhere was expecting me. The cold crept in slowly. The car clicked and settled as it cooled, each sound louder than it should have been. I watched my breath fog the glass again and again, grounding myself in the only thing still predictable. I thought about all the moments she could have told me. All the times she listened to me describe selling my house, packing my life, saying goodbye, and said nothing. I didn't cry. Grief hadn't arrived yet. Shock was still in charge. I just sat there, watching the sky begin to lighten at the edges, Christmas morning creeping in like it didn't know it wasn't welcome. People think betrayal is loud. They imagine screaming matches, dramatic exits, doors slamming, accusations flying like shrapnel. But betrayal is usually quiet. It's the soft buzz of a returned payment. A sentence spoken too late. A future dissolving without resistance. I stayed in that parking lot longer than I should have. Long enough to watch the street lamp finally go dark, as if even it had decided to stop pretending. I didn't know what came next. I only knew what didn't. I couldn't go backward. I couldn't go forward the way I'd planned. And I couldn't pretend that love survives without honesty. What I gave wasn't foolishness. It was faith. And faith, when misplaced, doesn't make you weak. It leaves you standing in the wreckage, still capable of choosing what happens next. I would rebuild. I would recover. I would find stability again. But not today. Today, Christmas arrived without me. And I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you do isn't leaping into the unknown. It's surviving the fall after someone promised they'd be there to catch you.